wheels do indeed keep turning. As Enroue reminded me, we are in spring.
I'm hoping that's not the revelation for the day.
We are in spring, because I was just like, well, spring has finally shown up, and he was like, Babz, we are in spring. Spring is transitional, and I would agree. I'm ready to transition to some hot weather, but okay.
You want
I'm
summer.
I want the beginning of summer, not the end of summer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I want the beginning. So hello, Enroue. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well.
It's very nice
I'm
to see
doing
you
good.
as always.
You too.
So as is our custom on LoveBabz Love Talk, when you show up, you always come with the opening prayer, perhaps, or a song,
Hmm. Yeah,
or an offering
yeah.
of such.
I like the one we've been doing, this ancestor one.
I love it too.
Yeah, which is the for those, um, or just to share it again. The meaning is greeting and giving thanks to our, like, the kind of honorable male, female, and ancestral lines that we come from, thanking them for the ashe that they've given us and letting them know that we are using it today. So the ashe are the gifts, the blessings, the power, the authority, the abilities, the affinities that come through them to us. So much of who we are is really because of them. And yes, we're this magical, unique blend of personhood that we are, with our own lives. We also come connected. And so this song honors that, and is also the reminder of using those gifts and those things that we are born with today. Ba 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 tofu washe o. Ba 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 tofu washe. Ba 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 tofu washe o. Ba 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 tofu washe. Ashe te fu wanan lo you. Ba 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 tofu washe. Ba ye ye tofu washe o. Ba ye ye tofu washe. Ba ye ye tofu washe. Ba ye ye tofu washe. Ashe te fu wanan lo you. Ba ye ye tofu washe. Ba egun tofu washe o. Ba egun washe. Ba egun tofu washe o. Ba egun tofu washe. Ashe te fu wanan lo you. Ba egun tofu washe. Ba egun tofu washe. Ba egun tofu washe. Ba egun tofu washe. Ashe.
Shay, that just gives me what I need.
Good.
So how are you? What are we going to step into and unpack today? Because
Um,
I know you show up with something on your spirit, and I've learned to just show up and be receptive.
hmm. It's funny because I was really like, what am I gonna say? What's it gonna be about? What's the things? Da, da, da. And I kept having to tell myself, like, just be. It's okay. Don't worry. Be present. And I had some ideas around. So, but then of course I was still fretting about it because I also do that.
Uh-huh.
And so there was some thoughts around like right relationship, like being in right relationship with our ancestors, Orisha, each other, the earth. And then this morning I was sitting outside, and I guess I had a moment of this yesterday too, which I was remembering. But just actually feeling a lot of tenderness right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Tenderness as in a sore, or tenderness as in,
oh, no, not as
or
like an
like,
injury,
oh,
as
lovingly
like a
kind
tender
of,
heart. Yeah, like
yeah.
lovingly, like
Mhm.
compassion and empathy, and really tenderness towards I mean, just everybody, right? All the people who are listening, tenderness towards myself, tenderness towards you and Harry. And, these are challenging times. And something that's been important to me, which I've mentioned before, I think the last time I was on, and continues to be important, is really a deepening of my practice to help connect with the things deeper and kind of greater than circumstances, right? So there's like circumstances of suffering that we're in, that we've actually been in for generations. We talk about systems of oppression. There's suffering in our lives just based on relationships and challenges, just trying to navigate the world, pain that's there. And so while these practices have been really helpful, also just remembering that there's also still a lot of pain happening. And so wanting to, I think, speak to that it's, even for myself, I can fall into yes, there's pain, and look over here, there's like still joy and love, and like spring is emerging, even as this pandemic was like rolling over people and through people's lives. And it's also really important to be present with the tenderness, present with the grief, present with the pain, which is, there's this difference between pain and suffering, right? Pain is it hits us, and suffering can be when that's continual. And there are aspects of suffering that we also generate, right? We generate the they don't love me version, or if I get hurt in the morning, I'm still ruminating on it in the afternoon, even though that the pain itself may be gone, right? Or may settle in differently. And dealing with pain is very different than dealing with suffering. But regardless of all what we call it or what it is or isn't, I think just this feeling of wanting to speak to the parts of ourselves that just need some comfort and that are tender, right? And that are tired and raw and want something to be different, and it's not. To the people who still, right, don't have some basic resources, don't have enough to eat, don't have work, are struggling with loved ones, struggling with people who've passed away, or struggling with being so physically isolated that they haven't touched another human being since this began. All of those things, because those are happening and those are real, and it's important to not shy away from them, not to like, oh, I'm in pain, so let me like drop into it and kind of disappear into it. But it's all a part of being a human person. And so we can also let ourselves breathe into that. Let ourselves feel in our bodies where the tightness is, where the strain is, where the stress is, where the overwhelm is, and give that some care and give that some love. And so even now, if people are listening, or for those who are listening, right, just pause.
No, there are people listening.
Just pause for a minute and feel what's happening in your body. Feel what's happening in your shoulders, in your neck, in your jaw, in your belly, in your back, in your legs, in your hips, in your eyes, maybe your forehead. All just allow yourself to feel what's happening in your body, and just let yourself know that you are there. You are going to be present with that, whatever those sensations are. Could be tension, could be numbness, could be ease, could be heat, could be motion, without putting a label on it. Just to begin to give yourself a moment to be with yourself, and to say that I'm here, and I'm going to do my best to be here.
Because that can be tricky for people.
Yeah.
Because we move so quickly away from the things that we feel.
Yeah. Because there's stuff to do.
There's a mountain of things to be done.
Yeah.
And I think too, people think if they dwell too long in the space of being in with themselves that they may not be able to get up from themselves.
Yeah.
That's a real fear for some people.
And so if that's true, then just be with that. Like, be with the fear of like, I'm not going to do that. Right. That's a whole nice, pleasant thing he's talking about. I'm not going to do that. Right. So let yourself be with that. Say, okay, like you're in a place where like you don't feel that you can pause. And there may be some, like the logistical things, like there's not the time of the day I got to go from here to here to here to here. And the invitation isn't to kind of step out of your life, but can you bring yourself with yourself in your life? And
That's
if
a good
not,
point. I love that point.
yeah, I mean,
Don't step out of your life. Bring yourself with your life to this.
And so whatever that is, like there's that tenderness. Can you just hold that? I can't stop. I got to go here. I got to do this for me, for others, I'm taken care of, and I have to do so many things. There's a mountain of things to do. Okay. So can you be with yourself and give yourself some care and some compassion that is the state of things right now? Or maybe it has always been the state of things and you can't imagine anything different.
And I find that useful when I'm transitioning from one thing to the next thing. When I have to step into, the mother role or the friend role or the editor role or whatever the roles are, so that I have a little bit of separation as I transition to these different things, so that it cuts down on the overwhelm a little bit, right? When I stay like, okay,
because there's a Babz in all of that. Right, there's actually some continuity between the roles.
Yes.
Which we forget, which can be easily forgotten. Even if we bring certain aspects of ourselves in certain interactions, right? Here's the role that I'm in here. Can we also hold the even actually larger, more significant aspect of ourselves that has nothing to do with the role, but is actually what the role is rooted in, what the role is based on, right? There's a personhood of who we are that is and isn't connected to the role. Because if we stop the role, we still exist. Right?
Exactly.
So there's something or something else that's in us that's not about the role, that's not about the doing, that's not about what I think, how I think I should be, or how I think other people think I should be.
Yeah. I always, in my spiritual direction practice, one of the first things I do with people when I meet them is I get them to think about who they are when they strip away all the labels. Like every label that you have ever held or know about, put it down. And then what happens? Like when you no longer can identify yourself as X, Y, or Z, whatever. Who are you in those, at that common denominator, at the lowest common denominator? How do you define yourself when you cannot hold on to labels of what you do and who you hope to be and all that kind of stuff?
It's beautiful because actually there's an exercise I don't know, developed or came to me or something. It was something for me, and then I started sharing it with clients. It's basically what you're just saying, and I'll offer it to folks now to try out. So it's just these phrases you're just going to repeat internally. You're going to have a whole lot of thoughts and counter thoughts to them, and that's okay. Just stay with the phrases. So as you're inhaling, you're just going to say to yourself, there's nothing to do. And as you're exhaling, you're going to say to yourself, there's no one to be.
Oh, I love that.
And so for this minute, well, we don't like silence on the radio and such, but like I'm going to let folks do this for a minute. For the minute, there is nothing else that you need to do, right? So even with the list of things that may pop into your head, that's for later. And so just stay with the right now. There is nothing to do. There's no one I have to be. And I'm going to keep talking, but just let yourself try that on for just for a minute. As you inhale, there's nothing to do. And as you exhale, there's no one to be. And you may have to say that several times in an inhale and exhale, and then you just keep going. Nothing to do. And there's no one to be. So you don't have to breathe any particular way. You just follow how your body is breathing. Trusting that your breath is just going to help to ground you and keep you in the present. You stay with there's nothing to do and there's no one to be. And it's an opportunity to allow space to be present with this aspect of yourself that has value regardless of what you're doing, regardless of how you're showing up, regardless of how you think you are. You have value just because. Just as we sang this ancestor song, your value and power that comes with you as you're born. And for us to lean on our ancestors, to lean on the Orisha, to lean on our notions of God and each other and the earth, all of these forces around us to support us just in discovering who we are and being who we are. But it's not something we have to figure out, that there's not right in this moment, right? There's nothing you have to do to express your right to be here. There's no one you have to be. There's not a definition. There's not a articulation. There's not an expression that is the justifying thing. You are. And it's as simple as following your breath. Fundamentally, there's all kinds of stories. I know I'm only valuable if I can do this for this people or for myself. I'm only valuable if I can be this role, right? If I can show up in this way. Or if I can see myself in a certain way, that's what my value is. But our value is beyond that. So just try that breath one more time. There's nothing to do, no one to be. And see if some space can do a little bit of what I like to see it as almost like this crowbar that gets wedged in these notions of who we are, what our life is really about, to like pry it open and make a little bit of space for something else, for a different aspect of ourselves. Be present and to have an experience of that. Or really being present with the struggle of like, nope, not believing any of it. My mind is just racing. It's like, this is ridiculous. And of course there are things to do and it's important what I'm doing and how I am. And you can just notice that and be with that, which has, I don't want to say better, but can offer something, even if you can notice those thoughts versus just being swallowed by them or pulled along by them. To notice, it's like the thinking about a thought, the thinking about a feeling, the perspective, a little stepping away from just being.
I like the space of peace that it creates. You know what? Because this is the thing that people, run to ashrams for. This is what people run to. They run to India for, and they run to the Himalayas. You know what I mean? Like people run to places to get that kind of stillness and peace, which is just, geography, really. You can create that sense of peace, even in the midst of chaos. Right. That's really for me, that's the goal, to sort of be peaceful, even when wherever I am. I don't have to go find peace. Peace is already within.
Right. And plug into it.
The muscles,
with practice.
The practice.
Yeah.
That was good. I know people are like pausing all over the place.
That's good. So I also want to know, so Babz, I know things are different now with the pandemic, but you often say people are stopping you on the street, and maybe people still are in whatever way that's happening. But I'm curious about questions that come up, questions that emerge kind of prompted from these conversations or monologues or diatribes or back and forth that we do.
I think, for me, what I hear all the time from people is, I mean, they feel so enlightened after they hear you speak about, they hear our conversation. And you've got a nice little fan base that sort of, I ought to really let people know when you show up, because people are like, okay, when is he going to be on? When is he going to be on? I think people really appreciate how what we talk about can fit into their lives without a whole lot of rearrangement. You know what I mean? Like, there's no place that you have to go to sort of learn or be or do. Like, there's no heavy lifting around. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no membership.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think of a couple things. Is that just some seeking that people are in, right? In a place of really wanting to hear something different, and that's relevant. And I think that there's a lot of power in, as a Orisha worshiper, as a priest in that tradition, this current, right? So it's a traditional religion and practice of the Yoruba people who are mostly in Nigeria. And it's a current practice. This isn't just, long ago in the time immemorial, right? These are kind of how our long lost ancestors lived. These are practices alive and well. Certainly under assault and struggling, mostly because of the impact of Christianity and Islam on traditional religions, and the ways that those there are aspects of people in those traditions who are actively wanting to destroy these traditional ways. It's not a happenstance. It's not a passive thing. And so that is also part of it, as well as ways that is growing and is spread in the diaspora. But these are ways that is so two things. One is, as a traditional African system, I think it's important that people of African heritage recognize the strength and the complexity of these practices, the rootedness of them, that we, whether our ancestors were Yoruba or from Central Africa or other parts of Western Africa or East Africa, or wherever they were from, has its own traditions and practices, right? We come from people who were rooted in different ways of being together and of nurturing each other that was 100% relevant to who we are. And so here in the United States, we're under assault in a multitude of ways about who we are. And so it's important that as people of African heritage, there's a acknowledgement and a remembering, like, oh, the things that we hold on to that make us Black are because of our African heritage. And there's a richness that still exists there in many places. In some places, the traditional cultures are gone because of the colonialism, because of both what's happened in terms of financial exploitation, but also what's happened in terms of religious systems and ways that those have been destroyed as well. So there's a rootedness that can come from there, which I think is important, which is relevant for us today, even as we're in this country, in this culture. And it is not also exclusive, right? It is not a tradition that is only for people of African heritage. One of the things about my teacher and godfather, Ogunwande Abimbola, was recently talking about, it is fundamental in traditional African systems to welcome other notions of the divine into a system. It's not like this is the way, this is the articulation of our connection with the divine and everything else is wrong. It's, oh, this is ours, and like, oh, you have something over there, and I wonder what that is, and teach us about that, and how is that relevant? I wonder if that can actually be folded in to our system. So it's like neighboring peoples, if people got married and they're people from different ethnic and religious groups, One would say, oh, we're doing our annual celebration. Who are your people, and how can we honor your people and what they also honored and practiced as well? So there's a welcoming in. And so as long as people are, respectful and honoring these traditions, they're welcome into it, regardless of race, or ethnicity, or class. And it's important to recognize that these are traditional African systems as well. So as people here are, what are the things that are missing from our sense of selves? Like, we can actually draw upon a much more expansive and welcoming sense of ourselves as full human beings, because we come from people and we come from traditions where that was just understood, right? The purpose is our destiny. The purpose isn't like, oh, I have to get out from under, an institution of chattel slavery first. You have to get out from under kind of abject poverty and what patriarchy is doing first, and then I can look at what my destiny and purpose is. We're born into a system which is like, you are a person, you are valuable to this system and community, which is certainly not, as people of color and a variety of other people who grow up in this country grow up feeling, and growing up having not just feeling, but having a system that's saying you are less than, right? You are not as much as. So I think that it's
that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's a very interesting concept. To be African and to be American, because they almost feel in opposition to each other.
Well, because one is saying, from an indigenous traditional perspective, you're a person. You're a person who with a destiny, and because of the institution of slavery and oppression, and how that's morphed into white supremacy, we are not people. So that's the contradiction. The contradiction isn't us. The contradiction is the messages and the systems in place that try to place us in a certain category, in a certain orientation. And I think that's part of the value of, how do we loop back to even the complexity of our ancestors, because there's a whole lot of mixing that has gone on. So there's a whole lot of ancestors and cultures and traditions that we can actually draw upon to remind us that we are human, that we have a right to be here just because, right? Not because of what we're doing, not because of what we think we are, how we're supposed to be, but because we're here. And to internalize the strength and the power of that, so that we can then creatively deal with the circumstances of our lives, whether it's because of a pandemic, whether it's because of institutions of oppression, whether it's because of trauma, whether it's because of issues around addiction, but to remember that we're not alone and we're in relationship with so many things greater than us, and that can be supportive of us, to be reminded of our place in terms of personhood. Not our value because of what we consume, not our value because of who we have a certain kind of power over, but because we are here just as, right, the lilacs are blooming and they're here, just as the nests are being built and they're just here, just as the trees are growing, just as the clouds are moving. Nature can remind us of our presence, of our inherent worth, just because. Even the annoying things, right? Like the mosquitoes and the leeches and all these things. And in some ways, even the
murderous hornets.
Yeah, and even this virus, like, how do we live in like harmony with all of these forces? And harmony doesn't mean welcome into my home. Healthy boundaries are a part of harmony, right? A good fence is a part of harmony.
That's a good point. How do we live in harmony with all these things? Right? There's got to be a pathway for that.
Right. Well, there is. When we come from people who have developed over thousands of years pathways of being with all of that, right? So sometimes, right, it's not the harmony like, I'm going to my enemy's home and like, let me sit with them and but it's like, there are forces that whose purpose is really to undo our works, Right? There's things like in the Odisha tradition, we call them, many of them ajogun. So things like death and illness and loss. And there are countless of them. And it's not that we never experience those things, right? We're all going to die. But the prayer and the hope that right, we're not afflicted by death before, kind of prematurely, like, before our purpose and before our destiny can be manifested, right? That it's not due to something that to pull us off of our path. And so there are forces that can act as an intermediary. Eshu, as an Orisha, can act as an intermediary with these negative forces, and will bring and kind of make an argument or trick them into leaving us alone. And so it might not even be right. We have to do the confronting. We have to do the challenging. We need to do right. We live in harmony with forces, and like those forces also act on our behalf. Because we are not the doers of everything. Actually, we are not the conductors.
That's a good point of reference. We're not the doers of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are a place.
I think we forget.
Oh, we're taught that something different. Right? So like these things come from a certain mindset and cultural perspective versus a place in it, right? A relationship with all these forces, not as owner, not as these are resources for us to consume, right? But how things would be transformed if we held sacredness of these relationships, even if we held the tenderness that we feel, if we could honor the tenderness of our lives, right? The ways that we often don't pause, but if we could honor that as a part of our day-to-day, as a culture, right, that would be transformative. Right? The vulnerabilities that we have internally, the vulnerabilities that exist around us, and say, oh, I actually want to be with that. I want to support that. Oh, here's somebody who's suffering. Right? So many times we see somebody who's suffering, and it's the response is to turn away. I can't do anything, or it's overwhelming, or it's their fault, or whatever the story is, and there's a turning away. And imagine if we were in a system that said, oh, that is wrong. Right? The suffering is, and what can we do fundamentally to not have the conditions that lead to that kind of suffering? Instead of kind of responding to a symptom, we look at what's causing the thing. What are the underlying ideas and biases and assumptions that are leading to that thing to look the way it is, and change those things.
Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be lovely. Our work here would be done.
Yeah. Right. Well, right. Then there's a different thing of what life is, right? What is, my I'm learning more. So I don't think I thought of this when I mean, maybe I did when I named my practice. So healing and liberation counseling, and maybe I thought about it to this degree. I don't know. But this notion of, we have healing. We have things that are hurt. We have things that are, I don't like to use really the term broken, but maybe, things can be mended in all kinds of ways. But the point is not to just be in a perpetual cycle of healing. It's to be free. And so if we look at what's in the way of us being free, and so let's heal the things that are in the way, so that we can be free. We can look at what purpose and meaning and unfolding our lives and having the relationships that we want. But we can't jump to that when there's healing to be done, right? And that healing is also, that's about honesty, that's about justice, that's about where the systems in place that are actually perpetuating illness, as a system, as a design of a system, because that's how it's happening, that there is a massive number of people who are ill, who are in poverty, who are being oppressed in so many ways. That's a part and parcel of this system. And so imagine if they're oh, so that's clearly in the way of a collective freedom. So imagine if we did that. Let's what needs to be healed and transformed and reckoned with and changed, so that we can really live.
I think there are pockets of that happening, but I think there is this perpetual feeling. Well, there's this feeling of perpetual healing because so much
Mm.
has to be healed that
Mhm.
we are that people. I don't want to say stuck, but that we spend a great deal of time trying to heal some things, you know, um, to the point of that's where we're going to dwell in the healing,
Mm.
not in liberation, not in freedom, that we're going to stay in healing, you know. That's where I see the most challenging for people.
Mm.
You know, what does healing look like? How do you know that it's healed? And can I move on and when is the right time to move on from healing
Well,
into freedom, liberation?
I think though, like similar to what you said in the beginning, like the kind of fear of pausing, I think people fear going into that space, fear
Mm.
going into healing. And so it's like, well, if I go into the healing, I'm just going to live there forever because there's so much need, right? If I start to
Yeah.
cry, I'm never going to stop. If I let myself pause, I'm going to fall apart, right? I
Mhm.
can't do that. I got to keep moving. Somehow the notion of movement and the relentlessness of that is the answer. And there are lots of people who are kind of ready, who are like, yes, I want to like look at the healing pieces. And it's not to say that it's kind of a linear thing, right? You do the healing and then you can be free. It's all of it's happening in our lives. Um, but so many, on one hand, so many um, movements and work that people are doing for liberation in terms of like changing systems, so many things get undone because there's so much pain and there's so much hurt and there's so much of people acting out of those places of trauma and of actually taking on the same values of a system of like, well, you know doing it means I do it all. Doing it means I never stop and I have to be the one to make it happen because I can't really trust something that's collective. um,
Mm.
can't really cooperate with folks because I can't fundamentally trust them, right? Or something that's triggered because of my own trauma history, and then I like, the work that we're trying to do together gets undone because of our interpersonal dynamics. Um, so that is a real thing,
Oh, that's very
right?
real.
And people like also get in those places of, right, there's so much hurt that they can't move from it, not because there's things that they're healing, but there's so much hurt that's like, I can't, this is too, like, it's too heavy a load, it's too big a burden, and I'm not going to stop to look at it. I can't think about these larger things because I have to literally get, right, food on the table. I have to be safe. I have to do these very fundamental survival things that are needed, so I can't think of and be connected to something larger. And so it's kind of all of it all the time that's really needed. But um, finding the places of support, and in some ways it's the opening our minds to other ways of being, right? And so
Hmm.
so many of these traditions are like, oh well, actually, so if you create a little bit of space, like, right, for example, there's nothing to do, no one to be. I mean, that doesn't come out of the Yoruba tradition um, explicitly, but this notion of there's not a question of your inherent value. There's certainly ways to navigate how to improve one's life and to be connected to your destiny and your purpose, but it's not an inherent question of value as a person. And so if we can connect and remind ourselves that there's actually a diversity of ways of being a human person, um, not just how we're oriented to that in this culture, that gives us a little bit of capacity to say, oh, so yeah, there's some real things about losing my job in terms of income and money and bills, right? The financial pieces that are very real, but who I am is not destroyed. My worth is not based on my job identity. My life is actually bigger than that, but we have learned in this culture that it's the other way around. It's what
Yeah.
you do is your identity,
Yeah.
right? Hey, how are you? I'm so and so. Well, what do you do? Right? What's
Yeah.
your job? That's going to tell me about who you are.
Yeah. And
And
I
even,
see it so over and over again when
Mhm.
when people don't have the jobs that they do or the work that they've done,
Mm-hmm.
there's a nothingness feeling that comes over them.
Yes.
And they do not know how to articulate
Yeah.
their own self-worth without that attachment.
Yes.
I just had this instance the other day where someone was just like, can we talk about what I do?
Yeah.
And I was like, all right.
Mm. Yeah.
Although I don't do that anymore,
Right.
but I'm still that.
Yeah. Well, it speaks to what you were saying before about roles. Like, well, I'm in this role, and this role, and this role. Well, if that role is gone for whatever reason, you may have chosen to not be in that role anymore, or it was taken from you, whatever, right? Because we have put the attachment of ourselves to the role versus the attachment to ourselves as a whole, then there's a void that is created. Like somehow we have lost ourselves.
Yeah. I see it with motherhood. I see
Mhm.
it with motherhood all the time. Like I'm so ready to transition into another part of motherhood. And I have friends who cannot understand it. They cannot identify with it. They're like, oh, no. You're always going to be that mother. Like, no. No.
It's kind of like the spring, Babz. It's not one thing, right?
It's not one thing. You transition. It takes on a different look and a feel and a meaning. What they needed at 2, they don't need it 42 or 22 or 32. Do you know what I mean? I see it with women all the time. I saw it with my own mother. Her whole identity was tied to the role of motherhood. And when that was no longer the role, she was quite lost.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She was quite lost.
Yeah.
So I know that that's true in so many other,
it can happen a lot with
jobs and other kinds of things.
Yep. With there's gendered roles and ideas around manhood, and my role is to be the provider, right? I do work, and right. I mean, whether folks are successful or not, there's a standard, an assumption of what that role is. And so if you're successful in that role, then many people identify as men in that role can feel this sense, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Don't ask me to do this or that. Like I'm doing the thing. I'm showing up, I'm providing, getting the physical structures around home and care for families there. And when that doesn't happen, a similar kind of like feeling of less than and shame that can accompany that.
Yeah. A lot of less than and shame.
Yeah. And so some of that is, these are stories that were raised on how to be valuable to ourselves and to others. And so if we can understand that there are actually lots of ways that we have done that in the past, and we hold different kind of values than what is being directed at us. Because so many of these values are about participating in a certain kind of consumer culture. And so if we understand our value is distinct from that, we're still impacted by it, but our value is not. And I think that's part of the tenderness that of being present with this morning is, people's sense of self and value being shaken. And it's both understandable, and there's not a blame to it, but there's just is this, look at what this is revealing, and can we take this time to be with ourselves and be with each other and help to be different, right? Help to understand our value and our connectedness and our relationships that are different than how we've been kind of blindly just moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. And I just want to encourage that. And so we have to actually return to ourselves as people to remind ourselves, like, oh, there's a me that's actually not about that thing. Even though I need X, Y, and Z for my basic wellness of like food, shelter, health, clothing, right? These things to be there. I need to be doing some things. And wow, life is still going on, and I'm still a person, and I'm still valuable. even if I can't do this thing or it looks differently than what it was before or what people say is valuable.
Absolutely. Wow. Another great conversation. All right. So there's a Orisha class tonight, isn't there?
There is.
So if y'all want more of this.
Yeah. So what I'm doing now is our more practice sessions. So what we do is we spend the first part, people just interacting with each other in some small groups, just introducing themselves to each other if they want to. That's by choice. And then I might talk about something out of the Orisha tradition, or some reflection, and then we have some time to honor our ancestors individually. There's a chant. I do sing the similar chant, kind of welcome and call to our ancestors. Then we pray, and people can pray individually. You know, they just turn the mic off. It's on Zoom. And then we shift and say some prayers and offerings to the Orisha. And I tend to do some kind of general prayers for people, kind of praying for people. And people can, again, listen to that or pray themselves, however they want to. And then answer any questions that people have. That's kind of how it's been.
And so how do people find you? I mean, people know how to find you, but
well, send me an email. Send me an email, and I'll send them the link.
Okay. And the email is what?
It's my first name, Enroue, ENROUE, at healingandliberation, all spelled out.com.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
enjoy this time. This is for my, listen, I always tell people, this is my own personal time. Y'all can tune in and get some of this.
It's mine too.
But this is really personal to me. Yeah. I'm glad y'all dig it, and I appreciate y'all tuning in. But this is really about, me spending time with Enroue, and if y'all dig it, I appreciate it. But
well, and if people have specific questions that they want to give to you, Babz, that we can riff off of and answer and deal with, that's really fine. Yes. I'm really open to I also really want to just address what people's needs are and what they're interested in.
Yeah, and as I capture that information, the next time you come, I'll send you those things ahead of time.
Okay. So or you can just throw them at me on the spot. That's all right,
okay.
too.
Well, listen.
So I don't need to prepare a whole essay on it.
That's how we get down too. Thank you, Enroue. I know you'll be back. We'll find another date.
Yes, we will.
Enjoy worship tonight, and yes. I appreciate you. So, thank you, Harry. I'm on my way out. Enjoy your Tuesday.
Love.